Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.
I'm Ian Richards, welcoming you to InFocus, a weekly program where we take a closer look at what's happening within and across the government of St. Kitts and Nevis, your government. Now, as we navigate through the complexities of the current economic landscape brought on by global developments, the government led by Prime Minister the Honorable Dr. Terence Drew implemented a number of relief measures to reduce the impact of inflation and other challenges for all citizens and residents. Today, we'll be diving into the value-added tax relief holiday and the Building Materials Reset Initiative. Joining us for this important discussion are Eliza Mills, Assistant Controller, Corporate Communications at the Inland Revenue Department, and Tonya Lawrence, Senior Tax Inspector 3 at the Audit and Investigations Department, also at Inland Revenue. Tricia Delaney, Communications Officer within the Consumer Affairs Department, is also with us. Stay with us as we delve into these topics. It's InFocus, your government, your business. Welcome back to InFocus, and allow me to welcome to our program Ms. Eliza Mills and Ms. Tonya Lawrence, Mrs. Tonya Lawrence from the Inland Revenue Department, and also Mrs. Tricia Delaney from the Consumer Affairs Department. So happy to have all of you here.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. So let's jump right into it, ladies, and we want to talk a bit about the tax relief measures that the Prime Minister implemented. But before we get there, we want to talk a bit about Inland Revenue Department and how does it interact with policymakers? Of course, that would be the cabinet. How does it interact with businesses? How does it interact with consumers?
Thank you so much. The Inland Revenue Department, as our mission states, we have the privilege of administering taxes of a federation in a fair and equitable manner. This, of course, positions us to be a perfect link between the government and the people, the wider society. We provide data-driven analysis and recommendations with respect to fiscal matters, particularly as it relates to tax and economic growth, thus making it easier for businesses to operate within the Federation. As such, we also liaise with our fellow departments within the government, making sure that any policy that is to be rolled out is in an effective and efficient manner, and is rolled out based on the principles that the policymakers intended to do. So, additionally, we consult with the private sector organizations for their input to ensure that anything that is rolled out they're able to comply with it as far as possible, and so we get feedback from them.
Okay, and so that makes the relationship with the private sector very important, of course, because they play a very important part in driving the economy in St. Kitts and Nevis.
Absolutely.
All right, and Mrs. Delaney, let's also talk a bit about consumer affairs and how it interacts with the public and also with the private sector.
Well, Consumer Affairs is the department that deals with monitoring prices in the market. I want to make it clear that Consumer Affairs does not set prices in the market. We cannot dictate the prices that businesses set for their products, but we do monitor the prices of those items that fall within the government food basket, and there is a markup on that basket, so As long as the businesses don't go above that markup percentage, we can't do anything about the prices of those items. We engage in consumer education. That is a big part of consumer affairs, where we educate consumers about their rights and responsibilities. We also engage with the business owners so they also know their responsibilities as it pertains to the laws. And we don't differentiate between the private and the public sector, basically. It's all businesses, anyone who offers goods for sale or services, we engage with them and just make sure they know what the laws of the Federation are as it relates to consumer protection.
Give us a sense of the type of consumer education that takes place by the department.
Consumer education in the department, we go into the schools a lot, where we talk to, let's say, grade 5, grade 6. Then we'll try to go into the high schools and talk to those that are coming out of high schools, trying to educate them on making good decisions when it comes to buying, making informed decisions, doing their due diligence when purchasing. So that is the type of stuff we do. Then we engage in social media education, where we post online different articles or different things that we feel the consumers should be aware of, and that sort of stuff.
Why schools? That's a question that someone may ask. They say that students, their purchasing power is limited. They don't have a job, essentially. Why schools?
Well, as much as their purchasing power is limited, you have to think about it this way. Children, purchasing power comes from their parents. So even if they don't have money themselves, they encourage their parents to purchase items for them as well. So going through the children, we are getting to the parents as well.
Okay. Now, at the opening, persons looking at this program on television or on social media would have seen some graphics that indicated, of course, the Prime Minister would have implemented some, announced, I should say, the tax relief measures back in December during his budget address. Now, the Building Reset Initiative is one that actually continued from an Independence 40 reset that was done back in 2023. But I want to touch a bit on these tax relief initiatives now. So let's talk a bit about some of the support that was offered from an inland revenue perspective, of course, that informed the decision.
The Inland Revenue Department provides data analysis insights on VAT revenues collected over the years. And such, we analyze historical trends with respect to VAT, the VAT relief programs that would have been administered in the past, and the VAT days that we have all come accustomed to and love to participate in. And so we measure the economic impact of those programs. Some of the things that we do is that we look at the revenue across economic sectors, and we look at the implications with regards to the rate changes, the compliance rates, and the level across all the different economic sectors. Now, for individuals who are interested in a lot more further detail, the Office of the Financial Secretary can provide more detail in relation to the exact or the overall tax rate reductions.
All right. So the VAT relief holiday, which is for the first 6 months of 2025, that would be from January 1st all the way down to June 30th. That is the one that we're going to be focusing on for now in the initial stages. And so can you talk about some of the factors that went into determining the reduction value? It went from 17% to 13%.
Well, from that perspective, some of the factors I would have imagined that they would have looked at is the overall impact of would there be any cost savings, right? And with that, we recognize that based on the trends that would have happened in the past, individuals would have participated in the VAT days. They would have sought to analyze that, and the figures would have indicated that persons, when traditionally they would have participated in these activities, they would have seen savings, and of course economic activity would have been boosted. And so with that in mind, I believe that the decisions would have been based on the programs that would have gone before, and those would have helped to drive the decisions moving forward in relation to what the expected economic outcomes that they would like.
Right. Mr. Lawrence, anything you want to add? I see you nodding in approval.
Oh yes, I agree. As my colleague said, based on the trends from the different discounted VAT rate days, I mean, it's more or less easy to see the way taxpayers, to see how consumers, how they spend. You know, when there is a reduction in the VAT, you know, we see how persons shop more and are able to spend more on things that they wouldn't normally do. So based on the trends, and we've had discounted VAT rates for probably as much as 10 years. So based on, you know, those trends, we can see how much consumers benefit from a savings in the reduction of a VAT rate.
And so, as you mentioned, it's for 6 months. What factors went into determining the period now?
As far as the period is concerned, we, from this angle, cannot necessarily say specifically what period, but I would imagine that 6 months is a significant period that would allow individuals to enjoy any savings. Oh no, 1 would be too short. 3 definitely doesn't count, but when something goes for half a year, definitely persons can experience the benefits and the savings for a longer period of time.
Okay. And so what are some of the expected benefits now of the VAT relief holiday?
Well, in terms of the benefits, of course, there is both sides we have to look at, the businesses and the consumers, right? The whole idea is to encourage the businesses to pass on the savings to the consumers. That would help to influence the pricing structure, give persons the ability to shop more and spend more. So it gives consumers the openness to shop, and it gives the businesses an opportunity to make a little bit more than they would have probably if the rate was at 17. Also, it stimulates consumer spending. So it provides that, this period provides a short-term economic boost. Additionally, it enhances the overall economic activity, you know, by supporting household businesses, and particularly, you know, during challenging times. Most of the times people like to look at January as a tough time because, you know, they would have spent so much. With this reduction in the VAT rate, it gives you know, a greater relief and a comfort to persons that they can spend a little bit more than they would have, and they have a 6 month period to do so. So it gives them that comfort, they can shop, and businesses have that comfort that, you know, even during times of inflation, that, you know, persons are still able to partake of their businesses and consumers are still able to spend. So it's a give and take in this process.
Right. And Mrs. Delaney, has the introduction of the VAT relief holiday impacted operations by the Department of Consumer Affairs in any way?
Yes, it has. We have intensified our surveillance efforts. So the officers are going out and monitoring the businesses. They are conducting price checks. They are engaging with the businesses and the consumers to see how this tax reduction has impacted them. We continue to educate the public on their rights, and we urge consumers to report any suspicious business activities that they may encounter. We also try to work alongside with the businesses and just to ensure that they know what their responsibilities are during this tax reduction time, which is to pass on some of the savings to the consumers. Now, I don't expect that they'll want to pass on all, but we are saying pass on some to the consumers at least.
Can we talk about the engagement that took place with the private sector when it was announced? And of course, preparations would have to be made, calculations within whether it be the cash register or whatever reporting system they have to do to Inland Revenue, they had to be adjusted. What was the engagement like with the private sector?
From where Inland Revenue is concerned, over the years we have built a close relationship with our clientele. And then, so consequently, what we have seen that a lot of our clients, because they are growing compliance, they have contacted the Inland Revenue, you know, via phone, via email, and as a result of that, we were able to address a lot of the concerns. Notwithstanding that, Inland Revenue also published a press release indicating what the position is moving forward, and also it was published on our social media pages. So interaction within with our clients. We value it, and we want to encourage our clients to continue to, comply.
And in terms of charging the reduced VAT, of course, now there is not every business out there that is selling that is able to charge that VAT based on the fact that they may not be registered. Can you just explain to us how that works as well?
Of course. Within all businesses, as you indicated, are not necessarily registered for VAT. But those businesses that are VAT registered, they would be expected to collect and to reduce their prices on the shelves. And so all individuals, we are calling upon all stakeholders, the businesses, to comply with this particular standard. We wanted the prices should be reflected on the shelves, and those should be reported back to Inland Revenue. Of course, those persons who are not VAT registered, as Ms. Delaney would have indicated, the government cannot necessarily dictate what their prices are, but we're hoping that as they experience the cost savings themselves, they would also choose to pass on some of that savings to the general public.
And Mrs. Lawrence, of course, it's important for consumers to know which companies are registered to charge VAT, because you don't want a situation where companies may want to charge 13% or 17% VAT when they are not registered. Can you talk about how consumers can be aware whether a company qualifies to charge VAT?
Okay. Well, over the years, we've done numerous public awareness. But one of the things a consumer can do is the VAT certificate. It is displayed, and it's one of the rules of the Value Added Tax Act that the VAT certificate should be displayed, and the consumer does have the right to ask the taxpayer, for them to see their VAT certificate if it's not displayed, right? And any moment in time can relay that information to the Inland Revenue Department, so that we can, provide awareness to the public as well as the business.
Mrs. Delaney, how will the Department of Consumer Affairs monitor whether businesses are actually passing on the VAT reduction from 17% to 13% to consumers?
Well, we are monitoring compliance by the businesses through different methods. So we have price comparisons where we are comparing the current prices to the pre-2025 prices. Then we have consumer reports where we urge the consumers to report those businesses that are not reducing their prices, or the businesses that they see that they still have 17% VAT. We ask them to report that so we can investigate it. And lastly, we use receipt analysis, where we review the receipts to make sure the correct VAT is applied, and if that is correct, even if the total price is not less than it was, as long as they are collecting the right amount of VAT, they are not legally obligated to do anything else. We are just asking them, like the Prime Minister said, to pass on these savings to the consumers.
Right. Okay. And have you encountered any challenges in the monitoring and enforcing of that?
Well, yes, we have some challenges. We have, let's say, manpower and resources. They are limited because we are a small department. We are a department of 10. So to comprehensively cover all the businesses in St. Kitts, that's a significant challenge still to us. So that is the biggest challenge that we face. Then we have those businesses that are not being compliant and are not passing on those savings. Now, we haven't gotten many reports of a lot of businesses doing that, but there are some businesses that are not passing on those savings. So in a situation like that, all we can do is go, investigate, take our findings to cabinet.
Okay. This will be a good time for us to take our first break. So when we come back, we'll talk a bit more about the VAT relief holiday and also the building materials reset. That is something that was also very important, especially for persons who are seeking to build their first homes. So we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back with more In Focus. Welcome back to In Focus. We continue our conversation with officials from the Department of Inland Revenue. That would be Eliza Mills and Tonya Lawrence from the Inland Revenue Department, and also we have with us Ms. Tricia Delaney from the Department of Consumer Affairs. Now, Mrs. Delaney, when we took our break, persons again who are actually looking at this program rather than watching would have seen a graphic where it would have indicated that the Department of Consumer Affairs did an assessment of the businesses, and they discovered a preliminary assessment, I should add, and they discovered that there were some savings. So let's talk a bit about that now, and it also feeds into the Inland Revenue, into the Building Reset Initiative, because I believe some of the areas that were looked at were also construction materials. Talk to us a bit about this assessment.
Well, the assessment that we did, we went out into the field and we collected prices ahead of this VAT relief holiday. So we would have collected prices all year long in 2024. So we were able to go back out in January of 2025 and look for those same items in those same stores to see if there was any price changes. And what we noticed is that there were significant price changes, and it was on the positive side. So for the major retailers, because the major retailers in Bastille, those are the ones that we went into because they get the most foot traffic. And just because this is only January, so then in February we'll do smaller businesses as well. But we have seen price reductions in household items such as like appliances and furniture, like fans, ACs. We have seen price reductions. We are seeing price reductions in personal care items that are taxable. And we have seen some reduction in services, such as professional fees. So we continue to monitor other sectors where prices have not changed as expected. And like I said, it's just January, so this is the first month. So businesses are still in the process of changing their prices. So we have to give them the opportunity to do so.
Right, and I'm glad that you mentioned personal care products and others, because you mentioned, and the press release mentioned, of course, fans and air conditions, but then there are some persons who can suggest, well, that's natural because the place is not as hot as it normally would be, say, in the summertime. And so there would be a natural decline of purchasing of those things.
Well, that is our assumption, but I can't say what goes into the pricing factor for the businesses, so I don't know if fans and ACs, if their price fluctuated just because of that, or is it because of, let's say, supply chain demands? There are other economic factors that goes into the pricing of products, so can't say for sure why the prices would have dropped. All I know is that they have dropped in certain areas.
Let me use this opportunity to encourage persons who are listening or watching this program and would like to participate. While we are live, of course, the program is replayed on Thursdays in several stations and also throughout the week as well too. But for those who are listening or watching live, you are welcome to join the conversation. You can do so by calling 466-2666 or sending a WhatsApp to 6623447. All right, so we'll talk a bit now about the Building Materials Reset, otherwise known as Build and Thrive incentive. It was first introduced, as I mentioned, back in September 2023, and it's now been extended to December 31st, 2025. Tell us a bit about how many persons have benefited from this initiative.
We, at this point in time, from an inland revenue perspective, would not necessarily house the information or the data that we can convey in relation to that. But as Ms. Delaney said, based on her checks, all right, there have been quite a number of significant cost savings that we are hoping would translate into other economic activity.
Okay, and tell us a bit about then how the VAT relief holiday is expected to affect government's revenue.
I think Ms. Delaney she started the conversation quite naturally to speak of what has happened historically. Historically, we have seen that there has been cost savings in the construction and building sectors. And so, consequently, once this happens, persons would be there's increased employment, there's improvement in the infrastructure, both for individuals and for businesses. Now, in the shortfall, there is some revenue that is lost, but if you look at it in the long term, individuals not only will save, but they will have an opportunity to contribute to the tax net, because with the improvements in building, both for individuals and businesses, the property values increase. It means that over time as well, they will pay more tax.
All right. And Mrs. Lawrence, if you could expound on that just a bit in terms of, and let's look at it in terms of the building materials, exactly. That's a good example that was made. Talk to us a bit more in depth in terms of, because Inland Revenue charges, of course, is property tax that is charged. So can you relate to the fact that someone who would have done renovations or any upkeep on their homes, how that would help to benefit some of the shortfall, the initial shortfalls that may be projected by Inland Revenue in terms of revenue collected, and that it would be basically recovered over time?
Because we're responsible for different taxes administered throughout the Federation, it may be perceived that there can be some lost revenue based on the reduction in the rate. In the same time, we are also providing persons with the ability to do renovations or to encourage first-time home building. So what happens in a case like that, if someone is doing renovations, of course their property value would go up, which means in event the property taxes would increase for them because it's based on the value. So where they could appear to be a revenue loss on the VAT side, definitely there will be an increase in the property tax on the revenue side. So I think more or less overall, there isn't really a reduction. There's a benefit overall where we see persons able to do renovations where they probably wouldn't have been able to because the rate has reduced. And on the other hand, we're able to collect more in property taxes because persons are able to renovate and also to go into first-time home building.
And that's also a benefit for them as well too, because of course it uplifts the retail value of their property, and it uplifts the retail value of the area. So if they're interested in selling or renting, then those things are factored in.
Yeah, that is very true. Very good point.
All right. So Mrs. Delaney, talk to us a bit about then consumer affairs, the work, and you mentioned that of course that manpower is a challenge. Now, the building resets, that is something different. So say supermarkets or some place that most persons would think of that Inland Revenue should pay attention to, consumer affairs should pay attention to. Of course, one of the important things is that there's no VAT on food, and persons always cry out about the prices, but I suppose that's a conversation for a different time with the Chamber of Industry and Commerce and the relevant persons. And I should mention that we did extend an invitation to the Chamber to appear on the program as well, too, but they were not able to do so at this time. However, talk to us a bit about how the work of the Consumer Affairs Department would change based on the sectors or the industry that you'll have to monitor.
Well, in terms of the different industries, it's similar across the industries and sectors. Take, for example, retail and household goods. We compare the past and present prices of the taxable items across multiple businesses. Then you have the service industry. We just review their invoices and their service charges to verify the correct VAT is applied. And then you have the smaller shops versus the larger retailers. We see that larger retailers are generally more structured and their prices are easier to track. With the smaller business, that may require for us to do more direct engagement and investigations. But as it relates to building materials, we did go out and check for those prices as well, just to ensure that nothing changed. And I can report that the prices haven't changed when it comes to building material like cement, concrete blocks, treated lumber. The prices are still the same.
So the savings are being passed on to consumers, they have not risen.
Yes.
Right, okay. And Inland Revenue, let me come back to, based on the best practices, because of course annually there is a VAT reduction days And Mrs. Lawrence mentioned it earlier, it's been going back for almost 10 years or so that has been happening. What best practices from VAT reduction days do you take to something like this, even though it's for a more extended period?
From an inland revenue standpoint, one of the things that we enjoy as an administration is that we have set policies and procedures, right, that can be extended regardless of the program or the initiatives that is going to happen or take place at any given point in time. So as a result of these programs, we have regular audits, regular checks that the auditors could conduct to ensure that there is compliance. Also, apart from that, they're doing the regular checks. Individuals are encouraged, based on their returns, to file on time and to do so in a manner that where they're reporting all of their earnings. Now, Inland Revenue recently implemented a system, which is SMARTS, that allows the department to more easily track the returns that are being filed by the individuals, and so we can analyze the data and look for any anomalies that may exist.
Mm-hmm. Give us a bit of an explanation of what SMARTS is and how it works.
SMARTS is our new tax administration system, and of course it's an electronic system that allows all our taxpayers to register and file online. As it suggests, it's a system that promotes ease and allows individuals to file at their convenience from wherever they are in the world, be it land, air, or sea. All right? As an individual who has the obligation to file myself, I have benefited from being a registered taxpayer, whereas I can file my taxes from home a minute to midnight, and they're still considered late. On time and not late. I especially enjoy SMARTS because it allows individuals the freedom to have the reminders. Just recently, the public would have seen that we have begun to issue reminders. If anything changes in relation to the activity on the account, persons get an alert. That never used to happen before. Persons are kept informed of whatever is happening. Individuals can file and pay online regardless of their tax type. We're still working, of course, to implement one of the last tax type, which is the property tax, but every single tax type that the department administers can now be paid for online, and individuals can file online seamlessly. So I encourage those individuals who have not yet registered for SMART to log on to, of course, www.SKNIRD, look for the icon, and you will be guided by the instructions there. If you would like to register and you're not as technologically inclined, feel free to come in the department. We also have persons who are within the department specifically stationed with you in mind. Mm-hmm. You need assistance to file your taxes. Again, you need not necessarily, and you're afraid, you're a bit apprehensive. So you can come into the department and the officers there would help you to grow in the process. Because eventually you're going to figure, this thing is so easy, I don't have to go down to Inland Revenue Department. And that's what we want individuals to realize. It's a system that allows you the freedom to not just take a whole day out of your busy schedule to file your taxes, but it allows you to the freedom to file at your convenience while you're continuing your economic activity.
Right. And a good follow-up to that, Mrs. Lawrence, would be in terms of the measures Inland Revenue has in terms of to ensure businesses comply with the passing on the benefits, the charge, what is being charged for VAT, of course, reduced benefits to the department.
Sorry.
Right. The measures being implemented by Inland Revenue to ensure that, the businesses, that they would comply with ensuring that they have to pass on what is charged as VAT to Inland Revenue Department.
Okay. Well, as we normally do, the process remains the same. We normally do regular audits and inspections just to verify that the correct amount of tax is being collected and charged. And also, we engage in a lot of public awareness, and we are on the various social media such as Facebook, Instagram, just to name a few. Also, we communicate with other stakeholders in government, for example, the Ministry of Finance, in terms of the first-time homeowners. It gives us an opportunity to see the persons that are registered for property tax. So if we need to, do an awareness on, persons who have first-time homeowners after the year that they are giving, without paying the tax first, that we can, go and look at those persons or those properties that have not paid their property tax. So it allows us to encourage compliance. We also work with, like I said, the Treasury Department in terms of for persons who receive state funds, that they get the required tax clearance certificates. And as my colleague said, with our system, it allows for real-time view of the taxes that we administer. So where a taxpayer is able to see all the taxes they're registered for in real time at that moment, we also can see it on our end. So it's easy for us to see as a person files, we're able to see that information right away, and if that awareness needs to happen for that particular tax type, in this case, while we're looking at the reduction in VAT, we're able to see persons are filing correctly, filing on the right VAT lines, and ensuring that the system runs as smoothly as it should. And the system that Eliza spoke about that we have, it allows the taxpayers to file on time, and it allows us to be able to work on compliance as soon as possible.
May I add, so one of the measures that should encourage compliance is that there is a 25%, is it?
Yes.
25% penalty for persons who underreport. Now, this is common. It's not necessarily just for the reset program, but persons, there's a deterrent set in place so that individuals, if you're tempted to, would be dissuaded. There's a 25. So within the audits, when an audit is done and it is discovered that there is a tendency, or if that particular misgivings would have happened, yes, there's a 25% penalty for underreporting. So persons are encouraged right from the onset to do the right thing, to file on time, but also to file what you would have collected.
Mm-hmm. Has there been cases of such, Mrs. Lawrence, in terms of persons who may have underreport and that penalty would have to have been implemented?
Unfortunately, yes, but the department, as much as we collect taxes, we are not here to overly tax anyone. So the whole idea is for us to create a huge public awareness. So persons are, even for consumers as well, we encourage them to pay attention to their receipts, ensure that the right amount of tax is being charged. Even for the other tax types that are out there, we encourage you to pay attention to your receipt. But in terms of persons not complying with what it is, we encourage awareness, and this system allows for persons to file with, at their own time and at their own pace. So whereas before the system we didn't have a system that allowed taxpayers to pay up to 11:59 by 3 p.m. our cashiers are closed. So you would have missed that, but maybe you were in a meeting, it could be a valid reason that you were. But now with our new system on board, it should help with compliance. It should help persons to, not to pay on time or delay payment, but at least they have that window up to 11:59. So we should, by this awareness and by having this new system, gives the businesses an ease, so they are more compliant.
Mrs. Delaney, as someone who is on the front line, so to speak, dealing with consumers, has the department received any reports from persons who are concerned that businesses may not be charging the reduced VAT rates?
Yes, we have had a few complaints. Happy to say it hasn't been many complaints. But there have been complaints that businesses have not reduced their prices despite the lower VAT rate on their receipts. So in some cases, businesses have maintained the same total price, but a lower VAT rate is on the receipt, which is deceptive and it is unfair to consumers. So in these cases, we have to investigate and then we take our findings to the cabinet. But like I said, it hasn't been many cases like that.
So in a case of where consumers may suspect that, how do they communicate? How do they get in touch with the department? What redress do they have?
Consumers should keep their receipts. That's what we always tell them. In a time like this, where we have the VAT relief holiday, we are asking consumers to keep their receipts and compare prices from before the tax reduction. We are also asking them to report cases, because what we find is people don't report the cases. We'll go online and go on Facebook, and then we'll see people talking and people will be saying this is happening, but no one actually called in or came into the office and reported the cases. So I'm going to take this opportunity to urge consumers to report cases. If you suspect something is wrong when you're out conducting businesses, if you feel like you're being overcharged, if you feel like they are not charging the right VAT rate, we ask that you contact us by email. You could contact us on social media, on Facebook. You could also come into the office, or you could call. The office number is 465-2521, and it's extension 3350. Just call us. Once we get a reported case, we go out and investigate. Also, we want consumers to be vigilant and ask questions when they are checking out. Don't be afraid to challenge the businesses if you feel like you are being overcharged. Don't just think you're being overcharged and not ask a question. Ask questions. Get your answers. If you are not satisfied, come and file a complaint.
Right, and of course, you challenge in a respectful way and a peaceful way.
Yes, in a respectable way, for sure.
Right, we don't want to have any outbreaks of violence at all.
Please don't go and fight with the business owners.
Right. Okay, and so there must be measures put in place, because of course you're dealing with money, and there are some persons who, as we say colloquially, may believe they're smart. So they may seek to sort of defraud the process. What measures are in place from an inland revenue standpoint to protect against that?
Well, as we mentioned before, we have a system in place now where it's able to detect, taxpayers that are high risk. So it gives us an opportunity to actually go out and, do some inspection or investigation, of the businesses, ensuring that they are following their proper receipting, that their cash registers or their point of sale system can accommodate the rates. And we do offer our guidance or assistance to the taxpayers so that they know, what is expected of them, and then all the persons that participate in that day, they've had to change their system before, so they are pretty much aware of what is needed. So we shouldn't have that issue in place. Like my colleague mentioned before, for anyone that is caught on the reporting, there's that 25% penalty, which we actually don't want to have to implement. So we are really asking, the business places to, comply with what they're supposed to, because at the end of the day, it's a savings for all. It's encouragement for persons to enter their business places and spend more, and it's also for consumers to be able to spend more. And then at large too, we work along with the white collar crime unit, to investigate and prosecute any instances of fraud.
Right, and of course, that would be the white collar crime unit of the Royal St. Christopher
Yes.
and Nevis Police.
Yes.
You're talking about the law enforcement are
Yes.
getting involved, because of course it's against the law.
Of course.
Right. Okay. You wanted to say something, Ms. Fair?
No, I'm just agreeing.
Okay, so we're going to take our final break, and when we're going to come back, we're going to start with Mrs. Delaney and ask about, while we would have seen cases where prices have decreased, are there instances where prices have increased? Save that for later. We'll be right back with more In Focus.
If you haven't done it as yet, please do it today. Subscribe to our YouTube page at SKNIS Media for regular updates, live coverage, and even more information on your government. While you're at it, like, share, and interact with our Facebook and Instagram pages at SKNIS Media and SKNIS Info.
Welcome back to InFocus. We continue our discussion with Ms. Eliza Mills and Mrs. Tonya Lawrence from the Inland Revenue Department, and also Mrs. Delaney from the Consumer Affairs Department. And we are speaking a bit about the VAT relief holiday and the building materials, we said, and how consumers are benefiting and what persons can expect as well moving forward. Now, Mrs. Delaney, I'll come back to you, of course, as before we took the break. I asked the question, and you mentioned that there are areas where prices have been decreased. Are there instances where prices have been increased?
Well, while the VAT has been reduced, we have noticed that in a few cases, and when I say a few cases, it's a small number, businesses have increased prices, but they are claiming it is due to other factors such as supply chain costs, inflation, or increased operating expenses. So what we do, we investigate those claims and we try to see if they are justified or if they are trying to offset the VAT reduction and pocket the savings or gain more from the savings. But like I said, it hasn't been many instances where we saw any price increases, but we have to keep in mind there are other factors at play when it comes to pricing.
Mm-hmm. So can you give us a sense of, not necessarily the businesses, of course, but in terms of what might have you seen increased? The products or whatever.
Well, I don't have a list of the specific products. It's just from the preliminary report. There were instances where just a few prices increased. And like I said, during the investigation, it was due to other economic factors.
And in some cases, I think persons sort of overlook services. That is also something that is very important. The VAT is supposed to be reduced on services, and that includes your bills. You know, you have to look at whenever you get your bills, if there's a reduction in that. You have to look at if you are dealing with contracts, when you're dealing with a lawyer, or their bank fees, there must be some reduction as well. Mrs. Delaney?
Yes, like we said, we saw a decrease in services as well, such as professional fees, like you have just mentioned. No one has reported any fraud or any deception when it comes to paying their bills. So I am assuming that they have seen the reduction as well.
But be sure to pay attention, of course.
Yes, we
because
always
as
ask
we
them to pay
mentioned,
attention.
yes, because with the changeover, there's some persons who may have forgotten. They may have forgotten to reduce the VAT, and so just be mindful of that and seek to engage with them. And of course, if they're not complying, that's where the authorities will get involved.
What I see happening most is people are forgetting that VAT is not on food. So those are the complaints that we receive more often than the others. And we would like to remind people that VAT is not on food items. So there is nothing we can do about the pricing of food items unless they fall within the government food basket, which we monitor closely. And if they are not going above the markup percentage, the business is compliant.
All right, and oftentimes when there is that VAT reduction, they save this in the supermarkets full. And I always tell persons, I don't understand why, because there's no VAT on food, so you're not going to benefit from it anyway.
Next, probably experiencing the cost savings in other areas.
And
spending it, more to spend in the supermarket.
So they're transferring the money.
That's right.
Okay.
And this is what this program is meant to do as well, transfer savings in one area so that it spreads across the economy. Yes.
Right, and of course
to stimulate growth.
Yes, and the budget boost wallet as well too, of course, is something that the government would have introduced in conjunction with these initiatives to help to stimulate consumer spending and also to help to ease the financial challenges that some persons may be facing at this time, as mentioned, based on global inflation and other factors as well.
Absolutely.
So what role does the Inland Revenue Department has now in terms of raising awareness about these initiatives and how persons can benefit?
Well, from an Inland Revenue perspective, it is one of the things that we hold here is communicating with our taxpaying public. Our role is to try and collect taxes yet, but we need to inform individuals of their role, their responsibilities, so that they can comply with whatever is being implemented at this point in time. All right, so our communications campaigns generally seek to make sure that individuals understand the objectives that are to be accomplished, as well as to ensure that they can comply with the programs.
And Mrs. Delaney, I'll come to you in the same vein. Consumer Affairs, have they been, or should I say, is their responsibility to help to promote these savings to the consumers?
Well, our role in this is multifaceted. We educate the consumers so that they know about the VAT relief holiday and their rights. We are monitoring and reporting to Cabinet, so we are doing continuous monthly monitoring of these items that we would have collected the prices for. Now, bear in mind, the businesses don't know which items we collected prices for. We just went into the business place and collected prices.
Did they know that is what you were doing?
No. We did not go and identify ourselves unless we needed specific information. We did not identify ourselves. So we just went in, collected prices, and now we are monitoring them monthly to make sure or to ensure that these businesses are not trying to gain more from this tax reduction. We are encouraging consumer advocacy by providing channels for complaints and reports, and then we work with other government agencies to ensure transparency and fairness in the market. So that is our general role in all of this.
Now, you mentioned earlier when speaking about the preliminary market assessment survey that was done, you mentioned that there were 4 businesses and they were in the Basta area. Are there plans to expand the areas? Are there plans to have similar surveys moving forward?
Yes, there are plans to do so, but because this is just January and this is new, we started in the Basta area because that is the built-up area and that is where you have more shoppers. So for February, we plan to do small businesses and we plan to do rural and west areas. So,
from an inland revenue perspective, how do you evaluate the success of the VAT relief holiday and the building reset initiative?
Well, we tend to look at internal statistics. We look at detailed analysis of the VAT, the revenue that is collected, look at the compliance rates and overall collections compared to what was projected. And generally persons can look at the growth indicators, of course, at consumer spending, which may be obtained from the statistics department, and look at the job creation statistics, which can be gotten from the Social Security.
It was mentioned earlier that there's the SMARTS program, the software that is there at Inland Revenue that helps to ensure compliance and reporting and so. And you mentioned that it basically was being embraced by persons within the business community and individuals as well too, who has to file their taxes. That's all a part of the digital transformation strategy that the government has to be more sustainable, to go more green in terms of less paper. Talk to us a bit about where that fits in.
Absolutely. The Inland Revenue, I am proud to say, is one of the departments that has embraced this particular initiative. We have, for a long time, listened to the taxpaying public. We have looked at what is required so that taxpayers can file efficiently, comply with the tax laws, and as such, it developed or implemented a SMART system, or the SMARTS initiative, or the SMARTS program, whatever, a tax administration tool that would enable us to serve not only the tax-paying public, but also the policymakers. As a result of that, Inland Revenue can now, because this is something that SMARTS would enable us to do, we can now look at the trends in a lot based on the data analytic tools that will be employed as a result of SMART. We can take those ones, help to present information that would inform the decisions moving forward, and at the same time keep taxpayers, aware of the information, of the requirements and things like that.
Mrs. Lawrence, I would imagine, of course, as the government promotes entrepreneurship and small businesses, we see more and more young persons getting involved in terms of owning their own business and having to have that interaction with Inland Revenue. I would imagine that they've embraced this type of a measure where they can use technology to help them.
Yes, that is very true. Like you said, because of the technological advancement that Inland Revenue has taken, and our demographic is very young in the Federation. It's one of the reasons why we drove to have a system that is accessible to our younger population as well as the older population, because we haven't mentioned it, but I think my colleague mentioned it earlier though, that even for persons that are not as young, that they are able to come into our department and utilize our kiosk. So even for persons who say we don't have a computer at home or they be able to use my phone, the kiosks are there at our department and there are always someone there willing and able to assist. So what this smart system is that it incorporates all the taxpayers that we have, and the department is always willing to help both young and not so young with with our system, and ensuring that they're able to file on time and pay on time and able to see their obligations in live.
I would like to share a short story. As we were implementing SMART, I was walking across the road just a little bit of ways from the department one day, and an elderly lady, she's in her approaching 70s, and she said, I hear about SMARTs and I'm going to be involved now. It surprised me because looking at her, right, I thought, couldn't she really manage SMART? But her mindset made a difference. She decided that she was going to get involved in SMART and she was going to remain compliant, and it pleased me so. So much so that it encouraged us in the process to continue to publish the message that SMART really is a tool that is easy to use, and individuals, if they're not technologically savvy, can come to us, get the help that they need so that they can grow as well.
Mrs. Delaney, I'll ask you a final question in terms of using the technology as well. I'm aware that the Department of Consumer Affairs was developing an app where persons can help to keep track of prices and so on. Where are we with that development?
Well, right now we are still in the process. I know it has been a long process, but we are coming close to the end. Hopefully within the next month or two, we should have the app up and running and also our web page. And what we want consumers to do is to go on to the app, and they should be able to see the prices of certain items that fall within the food basket, of course. They will be able to see the prices across the board at the different supermarkets, so they can be able to make informed decisions when it comes to purchasing. We will also incorporate some of the building materials and other non-food items so that people can see what is going on in the marketplace. So you will be able to pull it up on your phone and check to see who has the lowest price for, let's say, milk. And you could decide if you're going to go and shop there for milk.
Right.
So we're still in the process.
Right, and so with just about a minute left, I'll give you a final opportunity, each of you, to make a final comment. Mrs. Delaney, we'll start with you.
Well, in closing, what I like to do is just encourage or urge the consumers to report those businesses that they see doing unethical or misleading practices. We ask that you report it to the department. So come into the department, speak to us, allow us to go out and do our investigations and try to correct the wrongs for the consumers. This is what we do. We are here to protect the consumers. So we encourage you all to come out and let us know what is going on in the marketplace, not on Facebook.
Mrs. Lawrence?
All right. And for taxpayers or businesses or individuals who are concerned about filing your VAT online, we have accommodated the a line item for the 13% for the reduced VAT rate. So it's not to be mixed with the 13% for the building materials initiative. So there is one. So we're asking you to pay attention to your filing online, and if you have any issues, please reach out to the department and we'll be glad to assist you.
Miss Mills.
That's fine. We want to encourage, again, all individuals to contact the Inland Revenue Department. We're not only open 24/7 online, we're here to serve you. All right, so if you have any concerns whatsoever, no matter how small you think or trivial it is, feel free. Our arms are open and we're willing and ready to serve.
Ms. Mills, Mrs. Lawrence, and Mrs. Delaney, thank you so much for being with us on this edition of InFocus.
Thank you for having us.
And I'd like to encourage you, viewers and listeners, since everyone is encouraging, that you join us next week for another edition of InFocus at the same place at the same time. For now, I'm Ian Richards. Remember, it's InFocus, your government, your business.
Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.